All right, Shalom family, I'm back with another one. This is the Semitic Jew channel where we look at scripture as it should be looked at, not with any emotionalism or anything like that, but with truth. So today we're looking at Deuteronomy 28, verse 15 through 68, the covenant curses. So I'm not looking at any traditions or any thoughts by the 1948 group. I'm not looking at vibes. I'm not trying to be the most popular person on YouTube. What I want to do is I want to look at the covenant structure and I want to look at the evidence because the question is simple. What does the covenant say? And who is the covenant legally binding to? And what happens when a covenant people or when the people who are tied to the covenant break that covenant? Let's get started. All right. Covenant trigger. That begins essentially in verse 15. Verse 15 opens with a conditional statement, which is disobedience lead to something that is called a curse. So first you got to notice the if in the sentence, because that means that if these curses, or excuse me, which means that these curses aren't necessarily random. They are conditioned upon the covenant, which means they are the triggering component for the covenant. The second thing is that this is legal covenant framework, people. So it's not like just some words or just, fantastic literature that has been spread around the world. No, these are legal words from God Himself. So it's very exclusive. Deuteronomy is the Israelites' covenant between God. It's a covenantal document, okay? It's a legal document with God, the God of gods, the King of kings, the Lord of lords. So Moses is speaking directly to the Israelites, not to Moab, not to Egypt, not to quote all nations, all right? You can prove that boundary very easily because Moses says that he's speaking to Israel and the covenant is made with Israel and their seed. Thirdly, these are judicial consequences. So when you see the curses, you don't read them as like a form of generic suffering, like, oh man, everybody went through slavery, bro. You read them as covenant penalties for the covenant people, not ascribed to everybody on earth, right? So now, now that we're essentially establishing the trigger and the legal boundary, I want to continue. Generational continuity, that's found in verse 46. So this slide explains why these curses don't end with one generation. Firstly, the text says that the curses would be upon thy seed. So that is descendants, that is their lineage. Secondly, that lineage in particular is the Israelites, okay? And Israel is organized by tribes. It's tribal, all right? 12 tribes, headship and houses. So Israel or the Israelites are a nation structured by tribal families, fathers' families, and covenantal inheritance. So thy seed isn't just one tribe. It's not even non-Israelite tribes. It's Israelites covenant, the covenantal line across all generations, no matter where they would be scattered. The third point is this. It says enduring until corporate repentance, which means a national repentance of the Israelites needs to take place, meaning moreover that the covenant doesn't lift because you feel better or because another religion comes and establishes it. It lifts when the covenant people return, and we'll prove that in Deuteronomy 30. Now, that continuity now that that continuity is established, I want to look at the framework because that's also very important. So, the covenantal judgment framework, all right, this slide gives the categories that we're going to test, right? Sort of like the criteria of who the Israelites are. First, a loss of sovereignty. Second, families are fractured. Third, you have economic extraction. Fourth, global dispersion. Fifth, persistent instability, not, you know, billionaires, you got lots of billionaires for your family, or these people are never in poverty, or these people know money and they're none of that. Persistent instability where these people are scattered, hostility, and then finally covenant restoration and that mechanism. So this is very important. We're not claiming that one curse equals one isolated event, which is what people want to do with the text. We're showing the systems that align with these covenant categories. Now, category number 1, the loss of sovereignty. Just look at the screen. This image is setting the tone of what sovereignty loss looks like in real life. First, the verse says, smitten before enemies. That's being defeated. Second, flee 7 ways, which describes disorganization, confusion, and the collapse of a coordinated defense system. Remember, back in the Old Testament, the Israelites were organized by tribe, and militarily they marched out in that same way. That's not described here. So the collapse of a coordinated defense is what occurred. Third, removed into kingdoms. What does that describe? That describes displacement. Fourthly, the collapse of defense capacity. So again, that's the heart of losing sovereignty. That's the heart of not having a defense system, not having a military to represent us. Why? Because we're absolutely scattered. That's what scattered means according to God. So this is not that, they lost a fight, or, they were captured very easily. No, we saw insurrections all the time here in the Americas. You read about early colonial America. It was the wild wild west, and they call it that for a reason, because it was absolutely chaotic. So you cannot protect your people, you cannot protect your land, you cannot protect your institutions or your stability. That's what God was promising. He was promising that chattel slavery and everything that came with it was going to be a curse that the world has never seen before. So let's tie that to documented historical alignment. So, documented historical alignment, right? Sovereignty collapse. First, or I shouldn't say first, I'll say as a citation, you have Wilmington of 1898. An elected government is overthrown. Political power removed by force. Then you have Tulsa, 1921. Greenwood, Black Wall Street, destroyed. Homes and businesses erased. You have Rosewood, 1923. A whole black town wiped off the map. Permanent displacement. Oh, you think you're going to rebuild in the nation that I scattered you to? Mm-mm. You're not going to rebuild. The Move bombing of 1985. Government action destroyed an entire block of homes because of they wanted to be sovereign. But here's the point, because these aren't just like tragedies that happened. They show a repeated pattern of communal vulnerability. Communities unable to defend themselves against organized force. That's what God promised was going to happen as a curse. And that's just category 1. The loss of sovereignty. Now, category 2. Families fractured or children taken. That's verse 32. And you got to look at this image. You got to see it because this image is communicating something to you. It's communicating what family fracture means in practice. Verse 32 says that the children given unto another people, they're talking about transferring children. That's what happened. Not just a relocation. Oh, we were exiled into all these places. No, it's way more serious than being kicked out for various things. This is much, much deeper. It's deeper than just relocation. It implies you are absolutely powerless, that your parents would be watching and unable to recover their children. No military might, no legal power. You have nothing. And that's what it was like for the Israelites when they did not have God. Think about Egypt. God had to come and rescue them. So again, you got to pay attention because this is producing what it looks like for intergenerational fracture. It's no coincidence that we don't have an inheritance when our parents pass away or when our grandparents pass away. The vast majority of us don't. Intergenerational fracture, people. Identity, inheritance, and continuity break at the family level. You don't have a family structure, chaos. So we got to continue connecting these systems. Okay. System alignment, family disruption. Again, I can cite so many references. I'll give you a few. 1662, Virginia. The child follows the condition of the mother. What does that create? That creates hereditary status. Hereditary slaves or hereditary status means that the child belongs legally to the system, not to the household. Legal families were separated easily. Families could be split, children could be even sold independently and were sold independently, and the law protected that institution. Post-slavery institutional fracture continued, and it essentially caused instability through economics, incarceration, and state enforcement mechanisms. So this isn't just, families had it hard, man. Slavery was it was bad, man. It was awful, but we got to move on. It wasn't just that. We're talking about covenant consequences. People want to know why we are perpetually reminding ourselves of this because that's a part of the covenant. That's a part of us remembering ourselves in the land that we were be enslaved in. It's the category. Family fracture through institutional power. That's what happened, and that was a curse. Let's continue. Economic extraction. Again, you got to look at these images. You got to look at the images and you got to actually understand because this image is your evidence for what extraction looks like. Extraction looks like this. Verse 33. Verse 33 says, fruit consumed by others, labor exploited, economic subordination. So, first, fruit consumed by other people. That means that the output of your work enriches someone else. It is not a coincidence that we have influenced every culture on earth through all forms, not just music, not just sports, but absolutely everything. Cultural influence. People don't want to excuse me, I should say people want to be us, but they hate us absolutely unquestionably, the vast majority of people. So the output of your work is going to enrich other people. I can put out a video like this, and it will get maybe 100, 200 likes, or excuse me, not even close. Maybe 200, 300 views. But guess what? Someone else of another nation puts this out, it's going to go viral. That's what a curse is. I understand that. But our people think it's about the algorithm. It's not. Second, labor exploited. Labor exploited means that the system is designed so you produce without equitable return. I'm a university professor. I know how much money I make. I know there are people that make way more money than me that have the same credentials. Okay? So the system is designed so that my production is not going to equate to an equitable return. Thirdly, economic subordination. That means that the structure keeps you dependent. You cannot escape. That's what slavery is. That's what being scattered into these nations is going to be like for our people. Now, let's anchor that with tangible, recognizable systems, because maybe you still don't get it. Measurable economic alignment. First, plantation capital accumulation. So you have an entire economy that was built on unpaid labor. You got to think about that. Then, secondly, you have the black codes, which restricted mobility, contracts, and autonomy. Thirdly, you have sharecropping dependency. That means that labor continues to feed landowners. Why do you think that you have something called a landlord? You pay him. Your return is that you get to stay on the property. That's it. You don't own anything. They can walk into your property, they got the key. So and then moreover, the workers will stay trapped. Our people are in a state of trapped captivity. Most of us, even us who have somehow made it to the so-called middle class, we're still struggling. So this captivity, you cannot run from it. God promised it would pursue you forever. The fourth point I want to make is redlining. You got some weirdos online talking about that redlining doesn't even exist anymore. Redlining was blocking home ownership and wealth building through policy and finance. And you would be amazed that it's still happening in various places. I'm not going to cite one now, but I know of a story in California and Oregon. And I haven't done very thorough research in this particular realm, but I know for a fact it's still happening. The fifth point, we have wealth disparity data. Google was audited and it showed this very thing. And this is measurable. You can quantitate it. You can qualify it. Generational outcomes, not just personal choices. So that's category number 3. Economic extraction as a system. And I hope you see it. Now let's move on to category number 4. Global dispersion. Again, this is not, oh, we were exiled here, we were kicked out, all of our people were kicked out, and none of that. Because that means you were not captives there. You could be kicked out of a country and not be captives there. This is talking about global dispersion in verse 64. And you got to look at the screen. And some of the places are not even shown where we were scattered to. Dispersion is not just moving. It's not just, the term that they like to use now is exile. It's not exile. This is captivity. It's being scattered into other kingdoms. Verse 64 says, scattered among all nations, and there you will serve other gods and face assimilation. You will face assimilation pressure. Why do you think we have terms like KOON or Sambo or calling someone a raccoon? Why do you think we have terms like that? Because these people have essentially assimilated, and the cost of assimilation, hate your neighbor. Hate your Israelite brother or sister. And oppress them like we are oppressing them. So first, the scattering among all nations means identity is under constant pressure. You're told essentially who you are. You're an African American. You're a Negro. You're a black. You're not an Israelite. You're a Hamite. You're this, you're that. You're scattering among all nations means your identity is under constant pressure. You have to be on guard. You have to guard your children. Because if you think that they're not trying to take your children away from you, they still are. Valentine's Day, Christmas, Halloween. Those things, and then the pressure of society on you to participate in those things culturally, I'm telling you, you feel the pressure when it's around. Serving other gods. Now, that's not vague. It means that the adoption of religious systems outside of the covenant of Abraham, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, which is our covenant. So, and that doesn't just mean, we say religion, but this also means secular ideology, because as I mentioned, these holidays that have absolutely nothing to do with the scriptures, that has nothing to do with anything but their culture, the people to whom we were scattered to or scattered among. So whether it's secular ideology or some foreign religion, that's what this is talking about. Assimilation pressure means that other generations, our children, the host environment is going to shape our language. They ask you, well, you speak English. Of course. It's the nation I was scattered. My ancestors were scattered in, were brought to captivity in. Your host nation, your host environment. You're going to adopt and assimilate to that culture. That environment is going to shape your language, your culture, your name. We still have our slave names, our slave surnames. And it's also going to deal with our worship, which is why so many people, you say something about European American Jesus, you are going to get attacked by your own people more than you're going to get attacked by them. It's crazy. So we need to reinforce this with Jeremiah. Jeremiah said in Jeremiah 17:4 that discontinuity would take place. He said that you will discontinue from your heritage. So discontinue, that means covenant inheritance gets interrupted. It is not going to mean that, we kept our language, we kept the feast days, we were keeping the Sabbath. I'm telling you, these are curses that are easily identifiable on us and again, that may be me trying to appeal to you logically and emotionally together, but you got to look at the evidence here, because that produces identity interruption, not necessarily like instant amnesia, but an overtime thing. Separation from what was inherited, our culture, the culture that God gave us. And so this covenant displacement that took place was not just a geographical displacement, but a covenant continuity disruption. Oh, these people don't know who they are. They think that they're Indians one minute, they think that they're Hotep, they think that they're Israelites one minute, they think that they're this and that. That is what the scriptures are talking about. So dispersion plus assimilation isn't a hypothetical. The prophets already told you. And keep in mind, anytime the prophets were prophesying and speaking the truth, what happened? They did not believe. They weren't paying attention. Heritage gets interrupted under judgment. Now let's look at category number 5. We have verses 65 and 67. Persistent instability. I mean, look at this. You have to feel this to understand what this image is communicating to you. Relentlessness, or excuse me, restlessness. It's relentless as well. Restlessness, fear, instability. Those are characteristics of our people. We're absolutely restless, trying to figure things out. Many of us are afraid. I mean, I still have people in my family that are still struggling to keep a home. Poor decisions. That's instability. No direction. The text says no ease, no settled security. Remember, one of the promises of God was that we would dwell securely in the land of Israel. And again, you see what's happening over there. That's not ease. So here in America and where we are scattered, whether South America, Canada, wherever, Africa, where our people are scattered, there will be no ease, no settled security. Secondly, fear day and night. I mean, you have so-called YNs out here unaliving people. Those kids are afraid. They're afraid that someone is going to unalive them, so they're unaliving other people to prevent that from happening to them. That's fear. Day and night, a constant threat environment. This was a curse. Thirdly, you have life hanging in doubt. Our people, I'm telling you, you go to some of these communities that that the churches aren't going to, whether they be white churches or black churches, they're not going to these communities and seeing what's hanging on the where that people are collapsing, that people are on the brink. We're talking about chronic vulnerability, not just one bad year. We're talking about lifetimes. Some people endure a lifetime of hardship in our community, most of us. Now, I want to connect this to even more measurable structural indicators because we have some very, very structural instability indicators that I want you to see. Take a look at this. And this is where we essentially stop speaking in generalizations. We have wealth gaps, generational outcomes that show extraction over time. Secondly, you have educational disparity. Unequal access and unequal outcomes lead to structural conditions. Come on, people. Incarceration imbalance, removal of people from households and labor markets at disproportionate rates. You have health disparity, which obviously you have measurable life outcomes tied to the conditions, the access, and stressful environments. And these aren't insults, they are indicators. They show that there will be no rest. They show you what no rest looks like in a system of captivity. Now, the final textual argument that I want to make, Deuteronomy 68, or Deuteronomy verse 68. This verse and Egypt by ships. Now, I've seen so many Christians, I don't even want to reference their names. I don't care who they are, and I'm not going to reference their names because I don't want the thought planted in your mind. But I've seen many people who have PhDs, so on and so forth. They are manipulating the text because they don't understand it. They don't want it to apply to us. But I'm going to show you because again, I'm a logician. I know their education system front to back. I've been an educator for over a decade. I need you to look at this screen. This image sets the question: what does the text mean by Egypt, and what does it mean by ships? First, you need to understand something. Egypt is defined in the Torah over and over as the house of bondage. That's covenant language. Bondage? That's covenant language. Deuteronomy 5:6. Second, ships. Ships describe a literal mechanism of transportation. It doesn't mean, I remember reading in a commentary one time, they said that this means just, a mass of people we're going to flood back in there. Come on, bro. Who you fooling? So here's the key. The grammar allows symbolism and literal in the same clause. That's what you got to understand. You can have something symbolic or metaphorical or a metaphor and a literal thing in the same clause. I'm going to demonstrate that. So Jeremiah gives a model. He says the lion, for example, can be symbolic while the invasion can be literal, which is a symbolic referent, a literal event together in one sentence. The lion being Babylon and the invasion being what literally happened. So Egypt can function as bondage covenantally, and ships can function literally as a form of transportation. That means that the verse can legitimately mean that you are going to return to bondage by ships. And when they say that that's not true, they're creating a limited choice fallacy. A limited choice fallacy is when you say that it is only this and it means only this and it doesn't mean what you're saying it means. That's a limited choice fallacy, by the way. Now, the question becomes, what about restoration? Restoration deals with Deuteronomy 30, corporate restoration. So this slide is where people may get emotional. So we got to stay very precise because first it says call to mind among the nations. That's recognition in dispersion. And guess what's going to happen? You're going to be met with opposition. You're going to be met with opposition. Secondly, it says corporate return is required. So this is talking about a national repentance. No matter what landmass you're on, there are people doing the work and spreading this truth to all nations. The invention of the internet it's helping that to do us for us to do this in these spaces. So this is not private spiritually. Oh, it's my personal relationship with Jesus. None of that. Thirdly, it requires covenant obedience. Brother, just have faith. Don't keep the laws of God. Where is that? That's them telling you what the text says, what your ancestors wrote about. The Old Testament is what the New Testament writers had. So we're looking at the New Testament is their commentary on the Old Testament. You got to see it. It requires our covenant obedience, returning to what the covenant actually commanded us to do. So restoration is contingent on fidelity, our faithfulness. Once we are faithful, I'm telling you, the captivity will be over with. The covenant doesn't essentially restore rebellion. That's what they're telling us it does. Or if you keep the laws, you're cursed. Where is that, bro? So the argument is not that People try to rise and failed because the effort is useless. The argument is restoration is covenant governed. We're in a covenant. So without covenant return, the judgment framework stays active. Now the conclusion. This is my final analysis. We've named the categories and how to identify them. We've named them. We've also tracked them. Secondly, I showed generational persistence. I've established it. The text says that it will cleave to thy seed forever, no matter the generation. And the structural alignment, it's easily observable. So we compared covenant categories to systems, to documented patterns. We also looked at restoration and how it's required in a corporate covenant return. Deuteronomy 30 states the mechanism. So the issue isn't about appealing to our emotions, which is a logical fallacy. The issue is covenant. The text provides that framework. History provides the evidence of what happened to our people. And I hope you have seen it. Shalom. Don't forget to like the video, share it with a loved one, and also subscribe to the channel. Grace and peace to you.